Global crude oil demand is driven by the Chinese, the US, and Europe. Your question might arise, why? Because these countries are responsible for 47% of global crude oil demand. The US is the largest consumer of crude oil, accounting for 20.9% of global crude oil demand. Much of this demand is driven by the demand for gasoline due to the US driving habits. We specifically refer to the summer driving season in the US, where a lot of gasoline is consumed. A change in the US demographic, population demographic, and more specific, the driver demographics anticipated for the next 7 years could have a marked effect on gasoline demand and driver behavior in the US. I'm specifically referring to, when speaking about the demographic change and the driver demographic change, to the baby boomers. Research in the US has shown that past the age of 55, miles driven by drivers decreased dramatically. Within the next 7 years, much of the baby boomers are expected to cross this 55-year threshold, which would lead to a marked decline in miles driven by US drivers. This, in combination with an increase in fuel-efficient vehicles, has analysts expecting as much as a 500,000 barrels per day decline in gasoline consumption by 2020. The discovery of unconventional oil reserves in the US the past decade has led to the increase in domestic production in the US. It's estimated that production this year increased by 1.1 million barrels in the US, and the estimate for 2013 is for 500,000 additional barrels of oil to be produced per day domestically in the US. This has made the US a lot less dependent on foreign oil, although not yet completely unreliant. With all this in mind, what is expected for US crude oil demand? Demand is expected to increase by 100,000 barrels a day in the US in 2013. The expectation is for Chinese crude oil demand to increase by 300,000 barrels a day during 2013. This accounts roughly for about 32% of the global increase in crude oil demand expected for 2013. European crude oil demand is expected to decline by 300,000 barrels a day in 2013. This can be largely attributed to the current economic conditions and a trend of the past decade. Global crude oil demand is expected to increase by 900,000 barrels per day in 2013. This is in line with the average for the past decade. However, if you look at global GDP forecast for 2013, it's predicted to be 2.6%, which is well below the average for the past decade. If GDP projections are correct, we would expect a substantial downwards revision in the crude oil demand expectations for 2013.